Hello, my name is Alex, and thank you for joining me for this demo of Lifecycle Insights. If you don't know a whole lot about the platform, we should stipulate that initially this started off as a way to aggregate some data that seemed to be lost in the PSA and the RMM tools and some of the other platforms that exist around the MSP space. Today, it's really grown into a platform that account managers and BCIOs spend a significant amount of time in, generating everything from asset lists to user lists, budget forecasts, business review documents, risk assessments, and even security awareness training reports to present to their clients in a really actionable and boiled down fashion that makes it easy for business decision makers to get to the yes, as opposed to getting stuck over the complexities of the data. We do this really by starting with integrations. It's important to note that Lifecycle Insights will integrate with IT Glue, ConnectWise Manage, as well as Halo PSA, Synchro, and Autotask. We also get additional data from platforms like Microsoft 365, LionGuard, Breach Secure Now, as well as our API lookups for Dell, HP, Lenovo, Microsoft Surface, Cisco Meraki, and Cisco SmartNet assets. So what do we do with all of this data? Well, primarily, we're going to pull data from your source of truth, whether it be IT Glue or a PSA tool. And we're going to use that data to import customer info, contacts, as well as assets like PCs and servers, firewalls, wireless access points, those kind of things. When you hook up your PSA as well as IT Glue or whatever your source of truth is, we'll also get data for things like customer-facing agreement items as far as what goes on their contracts, as well as tickets. The tickets is used for a basic breakdown of what your support looks like for this particular customer. We'll dive into that in a few minutes. As well, we supplement that data once we collect it with information from Microsoft 365 to supplement users, LionGuard, which supplements users and configuration assets, and Breach Secure Now, which presents new information about data and metrics that is assigned to users, but tells the overall security stature of the environment. And then we'll supplement additional data to the assets with warranty lookups. We're getting purchase dates, warranty expiration dates. And once we have the purchase and warranty expiration, we can actually calculate out the end of life and automate the building of a budget for a customer. So let's look at what that looks like. When we drill into account settings, we can look at asset type policies. This is where we decide for our customer or for our average that maybe our MSP's average computer costs about $1,300 and we keep it for about 60 months. This is what we recommend our customers purchase. But inevitably, we're going to have a customer who doesn't agree with our best practice and says, you know what, I've just got to get more than 60 months out of a computer. I need to keep them for 6 years, not 5. We can go over into company settings here, and we can actually accommodate that by changing the budgeting functions just for that customer. If we make a change here, this means that this customer will now build a budget based on 72 months for the lifespan, as well as $1,800 for the replacement cost. We can do the same with the architectural firm or the drafting firm that's going to replace things sooner. So they're going to maybe have a more expensive price and they might only get 36 months. When we move to company settings, of course, it honors the client picker at the top. So we can pick a different client and see if they have different settings than the client before them. But once we've established what the default lifecycle policy is for an asset, we'll want to go up and look at the asset list and see how that really impacts an asset that we've pulled in from the PSA. So the asset we pulled in from the PSA, let's just pick a random Dell desktop here. And we're going to see that we know we have a Dell Optiplex 7050. We know its serial number, and we know that it runs Microsoft Windows 10 Professional. This was probably determined by the installed agent of an RMM tool, but the RMM kind of falls short. This last column here is probably about as far as it goes. Our tool will actually reach out to the Dell API. We'll look up the purchase date and the warranty expiration date for this device. So now we know it was purchased in 2018, sometime in March, and we know that it had a 1-year or a 3-year warranty on it. So the warranty went through 2021. Then we'll use that account setting configuration that you built down here to tell us that this asset, when it becomes 5 years old, so 2018 to 2025, when it becomes 5 years old, we want to go ahead and put $1,800 on the budget for the replacement of that asset. So what we're doing is auto pushing anything that makes it to the asset list into the budget so that VCIOs and account managers never have to spend time building spreadsheets for their account management duties to present a reasonable budget to their customer. While we're on the asset list, I'd like to go over a couple of other features that we have here. One of the ones that we're the most proud of is swatching. Swatching gives us the ability to really filter quickly. We wipe away the colors we don't want to see, And for this example, I can find all the operating systems that are really difficult for my MSP to support because they're out of support by the vendor. So that we've color coded those red, and we're able to swatch them right to the top. From here, I could create a Word document really quickly, hand it out to a couple of my customers. You can see the swatching holds if I change from one customer to the next. And I can hand these out to my customers and explain to them, hey, if you have money you need to spend at the end of the year, or if there's a time at which we can replace these assets, these would be where I would put my priority. So we can dump that to Word or to Excel, depending on the client and how they really want to see it. We can also use additional filters like by asset type. So I could grab just the workstations. And we could even sort by things like by location or by asset status. Now in my demo environment, everything is an active status, but you might have more statuses in your environment. But here we could say, only show me the ones that we're looking at workstations running Windows 7 in the Lewis store. So we can really drill down to a very simplified segment of the data and spit that out pretty quickly into a Word doc for the customer. But for the time being, we're going to step away from the asset list. We've kind of talked through the basic functionalities of it, and we're going to go look at the user list. So in keeping with taking those basic inventories for our customers, what we're going to look at here is a basic user list. So from our PSA tool or from IT Glue, we're going to learn that we have a user named Patty Morrow, and Patty has an email address. She works in the warehouse, and she shows up in my ConnectWise. Great, that's the way it's supposed to look. We also find that same email address attached to a user in Breach Secure Now, and we find it attached to a user in Microsoft 365. So what can we learn about that user? Well, from Breach Secure Now, I can learn that her employee security score is a 403, so kind of middle of the pack. I can also learn that she clicks on 22% of phishing emails, and she has a 22% phishing fail rate through phish testing. She doesn't have an average security score. That's probably just a glitch in demo data. And her annual score on her Breach Secure Now annual test is an 80. So I'm kind of worried about this, a menial to rather low last ESS score. She clicks on 1 out of 5 phishing emails. I'm probably going to cut her keyboard and take it away from her because this user is the one that's going to get my customer breached. But I'm certainly going to have this conversation with my customer. Then when we look at what we learned from the Office 365 integration, we also learn things like what license is assigned to this user and when the last time the user logged in. So if we see a red last user login, and in my demo data, everybody looks that way, but in a real environment, you'd see just 1 or 2 people with a red last login date. And what you're looking at here is users who haven't checked in the last 30 days, haven't logged into 365 in the last 30 days. There's probably a reason for that. That user's out on maternity leave, out on COVID leave. Maybe this user is no longer with the company and we need to have them removed from the system altogether and they represent a security risk. But these are certainly things that have bubbled to the top that we need to look at. A couple of other pieces of note. If you did have the LionGuard integration configured, you would also get the MFA status for a user in Microsoft 365. So you'd have 1 extra column that shows whether or not they have MFA enabled. So lots of things show up on the user list. Let's say that you don't have Breach Secure Now or you don't have some of these other tools, you would still get a user list that's pretty useful. It would just not show the fields that relate to Breach Secure Now or to LionGuard or whatever. So very customizable report, and we are going to continue to add additional features and functions to this report through the coming months. Stepping back to the asset list, and we talked about how that's really going to drive through to budgeting. We're going to look over at the budget and talk about how this end of life date applies to the budget forecast. So every asset that has an end of life date that has expired, it's already beyond end of life, is going to show up top here in overdue. Overdue basically tells me that this customer has $19,000 in assets that should have been replaced by now. Now, if we look down here at recommendations not scheduled, this is where if I had found something that was out of alignment with my customer, maybe they've got a bunch of Windows 7 computers left, I've created a little mini project where I'm going to ask them to go ahead and upgrade those. We can put that in as a recommendation with no date, go have a conversation with our client and talk about when they should be tackling that over the next couple of quarters, next couple of months, however you're viewing your budget. The simple fact is we can show that money up top here, then we can look over the next couple of quarters and decide when the customer can afford to put it in. Then once they put a date on it, once they tell us when they want to do the work, we can just put a date on the recommendation and our tool will automatically move it through the budget. And I'll show you that in just a couple of minutes. But by default, you're going to see servers, workstations, virtual servers, network equipment, routers, all the typical type of technology that you're used to seeing is going to show up out here on the budget. But we can break the budget down. Right now, it's quarterly. We can break it down monthly, We can for monthly for 12 months, yearly for 5 years. These are a couple pre-configured saved settings that I've already got baked into my budget. But very quickly and easily, you can switch over and look at exactly what it is that you're seeing in your budget forecast. And you can change it from yearly to quarterly to monthly, pick the number of periods, and go ahead and display that quite differently for your customers. What I do want to point out, though, is these are all the typical assets that you're used to seeing a configuration for in your RMM. We also get into some things like recommendations that I mentioned a minute ago, and contracts and subscriptions that don't just show up naturally as a configuration in your RMM. So let's look at what those look like. Starting with contracts. Now, contracts can be imported from Manage. And if we were to import them from Manage, they would be things like, and when I say Manage, they can be imported from Manage or Autotask, whatever your PSA solution is. But once we've imported them from Manage, what we're going to be able to pull in is things like, what does the customer spend on Microsoft 365? We bill the customer for it. The invoice exists in Manage on an agreement. We can pull that data from the agreement. We can show what they pay for managed services, maybe what they pay for backup and disaster recovery, or for any, if you have a relationship with another line of business vendor that you sell that product yourself, you can show those products here. But as an MSP, we want to include more than just what we sell. A budget loses value when I go to my customer with that budget and show them, hey, here's a list of all of the products and services that I sell that you're going to need to pay for next year. That really just becomes a list of accounts or a list of invoices. It's really not a budget. When we show them total cost of ownership, so what do they spend with the copier guy? What do they spend with that on that finance line of business application? What do they spend on that sales line of business application, right? Let's roll that Salesforce bill into the budget. Well, we do that by getting it on the contract, determining if it's a monthly or an annual spend, and going ahead and pushing that data over to the budget. So once we've collected all this data, then we're able to really step out of that account manager role where I just say, Mr. Customer, I need you to be aware I'm going to send you a $30,000 invoice for a server project in the next 6 months. And now we can say, Mr. Customer, your total cost of ownership of technology, regardless of me, looks like this. And even if you didn't have me here as your MSP, you'd have to pay someone as your MSP. So let's get into the bigger business and operations side of things and talk about what the total cost of technology is for this customer. The other benefit we get when we do this, above and beyond getting invited to the big table for the big conversations, is that I gain visibility into when I'm competing with another large line item. Let's say that my sales CRM software didn't cost $2,500 a year; it cost $25,000 a year, and it comes up annually, due every April. Well, I know full well that I can't go present a $20,000 or $30,000 or $40,000 server project in April because my customer's budget is going to be stretched pretty thin. Even though I'm not competing for the exact line of business application, I am competing for wallet share during that same time. So this helps us see when the budget has its peaks and when it has its valleys. And our partners are finding that when they present their big projects in the customer's valley of the budget, in the cheaper part of the budget, they're more likely to get the yes. The customer can see a long-term 5-year budget. They know that when this spend happens, there's still more spend coming behind it, but they're not surprises. They're spelled out. And the customer's more likely to buy in, to go ahead and get it out of the way today before the next project comes rolling along. The last thing that we're going to gain by having all of our contracts and subscriptions in here is visibility into products or services that we could sell the customer that we're not today. How many of you guys out there have a voice over IP solution that you're not selling to every one of your customers? Well, some of them are locked into an agreement with someone else. If we can turn this column red here, show you exactly when their agreement with the other company is null and void, or is in its notice period, where you can send the letter off and get that canceled, then we know exactly when to approach them with our product or service to go ahead and get that on their budget. So this gives us a little bit of a sales advantage as well to get our products and services back in front of our customers. Moving from contracts to recommendations, and we'll dive into recommendations way bigger later, but what I want to show you is the different kinds of recommendations you can have. So this is a Windows 7 PC replacement. This shows those 5 Windows 7 machines that we found on the front screen. It shows that if I were to replace them, I would solve for a risk that I found on my last risk assessment, and it would show my customer that, hey, once we get this done, then operating systems are no longer a concern. So we're lumping the business case along with the cost and the expense, as well as the age of the items, to make a really solid case for why we need to spend about $9,100 to get these machines replaced. And you'll see our tool has done the math and done all the work. But for the sake of this demo, I want to show you guys how quickly and easily we can create these recommendations. So I'm going to go ahead and delete them and go back and rebuild that Windows 7 recommendation real fast. So we click over into our asset list. We use our filters. and we come down to just our Windows 7 machines, right? And here we just want the workstation. So I'll go ahead and grab them all and uncheck that server. Now that I've got what I want to replace selected, I can simply scroll down and click Create Recommendation. You see the recommendation pops up. I can rename it Windows 7 PC Replacements. Right now it's in a proposed status. I'm not really sure if my customer is going to bite on it, but this is a pretty good customer. I'm pretty sure that they're going to. So I'm going to mark it a 75% probability, 80% probability. That's fine. And then I'll give it a better description here. So we're going to talk about the business case of replacing it. I'm not going to add any labor because generally we recommend that MSPs include the labor in the replacement cost of the asset, since this is auto building the budget months and years in advance. If you wait till this point to add the labor, you're going to have a surprise to your customer where we didn't budget for enough money. So as you're setting up Lifecycle Insights, make sure your replacement cost includes any labor that you would use to include at the time of the install. That said, let's assume that the customer decided that they wanted to go ahead and upgrade all these workstations to dual monitors, and we need to add about $300 a workstation for those dual monitors. So I'm going to add another $1,500 in materials, $300 a machine to add some extra monitors here. With that, I'm about ready to save my recommendation, except that I want to add those assessment items, those places where the customer is out of alignment with my best practices. And we'll get into assessments in a few minutes, but I'm just going to show you real quick how we can go in and pick a recent risk assessment that we've done for this customer and go ahead and swatch away the colors I don't want to see. So I'm going to clear away the reds and everything but the reds and the yellows. And now I'm going to go identify where my customer doesn't really match with my best practices. And it looks like I grabbed a risk assessment that has operating systems. I don't see workstations on it. Really should. So let's go try a different risk assessment and just see if for a different point we have a better answer. Yeah, here we go. So here's workstations, and we're going to go ahead and close it. So now I've got, for my customer, we're going to solve for these out-of-date machines that are between 8 and 13 years old. None of them have warranties. They're well beyond their end of life. And Mr. Customer, when we do this work, it's going to solve for part of the problem that some of our endpoints have Windows 10 Home installed, or maybe they have Windows 7 installed, whatever the real issue is, and that we're at risk because the workstations are too old, and we're probably going to have some issues with downtime. So this gives me a really nice argument for my customer to go out here and spend this $10,000. So I'm going to save this recommendation. And now we're going to go back and look at what happened to the budget. So having created that recommendation and not putting a date on it, this is going to leave some money in recommendations not scheduled. So this is where when I go to meet with my customer, we can kind of sit down and talk through it. We'll have a discussion about the budget. I like to kind of flip my budget to spreadsheet view here and maybe show them what they're going to spend for the next 12 months. So Mr. Customer, for the next 12 months, December, you're going to spend $500. January, you're going to spend 7,000, almost 8,000, then 7,300, 7,300, and then 10K. So Mr. Customer, can we get this done in December, or does it make sense to put this in February or March so we can get this money taken care of? If my customer says, yeah, let's go ahead and do it in December, no problem. I can go right back to my recommendation. I can drive in here and put a date in on it. I'm going to go ahead and do this work the last couple of days of December here to get this taken care of for my customer before the end of the year. I'm going to save my recommendation, and I'm going to go back and look at what I'm going to also change the status of my recommendation to planned, since we do plan to do this work and we've gotten a date from our customer. At this point, if I had a bill of materials, I could drag and drop that here, a quote from a vendor or whatever. That would let me keep it here. It isn't visible to the customer at the stage, but it would give me the ability to save it. So if I had to go back and look at it later, I would remember what I had quoted this customer. I can go back and look at my budget forecast now, and let's go look at that spreadsheet view because that was pretty friendly. 12-month spreadsheet view. There's no more money in projects not scheduled. That $10,600 has been moved to December. Keep in mind, originally all those PCs lived up here in workstations. So there was almost $10,000 more in workstations up here when we first started this demo. And just by adding them to a recommendation and putting a date on that recommendation, we've moved the money forward into December. So that really covers the first big chunk of the platform here. I want to step into the security awareness dialog box here just to show you guys what this looks like. This is another segment of data that comes straight from Breach Secure Now. If you're not a Breach Secure Now partner, this probably won't apply to you today, but we are going to be adding more security awareness training platforms into the tool. So keep an eye out if your security awareness training tool is not supported today. It might be in future releases. So what I can see here is my average employee security score is a 512. We got 5% of folks who are failing their phishing test. Average phishing fail rate is 5%. Our average micro quiz test score is only 37%. So this customer is not doing a good job on their test. We do have a couple of breaches here, but all of those breaches happened with one employee. So you can see last breach here. This shows what which employee was breached. This person's account has had passwords show up on the dark web twice. So we probably want to dig into breach security now, talk about this customer or talk about this person, see if we can't figure out exactly what's going on here. I like to present this sorted by phishing fail rate, because this really lets me sit down with the customer and say, hey, these 3 people here, maybe these 4 or 5 people at the top, these guys are really where your risk is. And I always joke that we need to cut their keyboard and take it away from them, but we really need to re-engage with these people, see what we need to do to get them to pay a little more attention to their email, put them on some sort of a corrective action plan so that we don't wind up with individuals here who are going to get the company breached, right? So we need to work on these folks. We need to work with our primary contact at this business to get these folks back up to snuff. But this is really just a presentation of the data that lives in Breach Secure now. None of it's unique to our platform. This all comes over from them. We'll get similar data from other platforms in the near future. So with that said, we're going to step into assessments, and assessments is a big chunk of our platform. Assessments, I always tell everybody, is about as big as everything we just went over combined. If you're familiar with assessments from NIST or CIS or any of the major benchmarks, what you'll understand is we have a list of assessment items, and these are just the things that we're checking our customer against. They might be our products and services. They might be some policies or procedures. They might be some best practices, or even some software or some hardware that we think our customer ought to have deployed in our environment. We'll score each one of those red, yellow, green based on how the customer aligns with our best practices. And then we'll go ahead and combine a bunch of those assessment items into a template so that we can reuse it. So a lot of MSPs start with our default assessment here, or they start with importing a CSV of the best practices that they've been tracking in a spreadsheet somewhere. If you haven't been tracking in a spreadsheet, that's okay. You can always start with our stuff and go ahead and manipulate it. Once you've imported and got an assessment template up and ready to go, you'll go over to assessment events and you'll add a new event. Now, for the sake of this demo, I'm not going to add a new event. I'm just going to grab one that we work with over here regularly. I'm going to show you how they get scored. So this particular event has been copied from a previous event. And this is a feature that was very much asked for by our partners, saying that it just took them too much time to go through 75 questions every time they started over with a customer. They'd like to be able to copy the previous event, see what the previous score was, determine if something was at risk, if maybe we had improved upon it. And in this case, we took asset inventory from red, not being performed, to green, largely automated and included in the service agreement. We've got some things that we haven't improved, like the internet security appliance. It was at risk before, it's still at risk today. This is the recommendation we made to fix it last time, and I'm going to make a slightly different recommendation this time. So here's the recommendation that I'm making to replace this for the customer. I do want to point out that in all of these cases, we can see previous responses. So I can see that this customer's always been failing on this particular item. In other cases, we might see where the customer was failing on it for a while, then we did something to move it to yellow. We did a manual inventory, and now we've brought it under best practices. We've automated that process. So once we get all of this filled in, we have a pretty good benchmark against our customer. Then we can come up here and we can print the Word document to deliver this report to the customer, or we can go compare it to a previous assessment. This tool is super valuable, especially if you're in the sales side of the business. This gives you the ability to go out and meet with a customer or a prospect. It's great in prospecting because you can come out and say, Mr. Customer, I've got good news and bad news. You're getting exactly what you're paying for from your current IT provider. Yes, that's the good news, and that's also the bad news. So what we need to talk about is the fact that, hey, your $1,500 a month is only getting you to about 48% compliant with what we think your best practices ought to be, and with what security best practices in the industry are. The day that you hire me, I will bring with me my backups and my antivirus and my email protection and my cloud email backups and things like that, to move you from 48 to 82. You won't be perfect, but you'll be better, and we'll work with you over the next 6 to 12 months to solve for some of the rest of the problems that exist here that are holding you back and leaving you at an 82. It drives a nice wedge between your customer and their current IT. This is also a good tool if you've been working with somebody for 6 months, a year, something like that, just to let them see progress, right? Because they know when in the beginning everything was broke, they called you all the time. They start to forget how much you fixed, and this is a nice chance to remind your customer this is where you came from, this is where you're going, but we've still got some work to do. If you're using it in pre-sales, I want to point out one extra button. A lot of folks have presented something like this, and then the customer goes, oh, that's awesome. Let me hang on to that, and I'll get back to you in a couple of weeks if I can get this approved. And what the salesperson really hears is, I'm going to put this out for bid. If I can get somebody else to do it for $25 cheaper, I'm probably not going to call you back. So we have a version of the report you can leave behind without leaving your secret sauce. Okay, you can literally strip the details out of it and leave the report behind this way. That way, you can leave the customer of the opinion, hey, you know what, you didn't pay me for this risk assessment. So I'm just going to go ahead and leave the bare minimum behind. If somebody else comes back to you and tells you that they can do this cheaper, give me a call back. I'll bring back the full version and we can sit down and compare apples to apples. And we'll talk about what they've offered you either as a great deal or maybe isn't as great a deal as it appears to be on paper. So that button right there, save you some sales headaches and frustrations. But let's go back and look at assessments from another perspective. Once we've got a bunch of assessments filled in for a customer, sometimes it's nice to be able to compare those. So here we can do some analytics on the assessment and grab how we've done them over time. So here, if we grab the same assessment that we've done 4 times, this is a little deeper than just being able to see each individual answer, but this shows me that they started in hardware at a baseline of 39 and now they're at 56, and I can see the growth over time. This helps me explain to a customer, hey, you know what, you were on board, you had terrible backups, you were on board with me, you paid for some backups, maybe something happened in the organization and you weren't able to keep paying the bill, we backslid for some reason, now we're back to doing the right thing. Often that happens with hardware, you know, some hardware goes out of date or something and we flunk out, and then we continue to improve over time. But this shows growth over time, improvement over time, and even if a client starts to backslide by not taking your best practices. The other thing we can do in assessment analytics is link the assessment answers to a recommendation. So quite often, maybe the recommendation isn't driven from the hardware perspective, but sometimes it's driven from the software perspective, or sometimes it's driven from the assessment perspective, right? Maybe it's not a piece of hardware that's failed, that's been the reason that we started to do this. But here I can see this customer has an internet security appliance that doesn't have the right security features. This is a security concern. They can't even turn on IPS IDS on that firewall. So I can fix both of these with the same project. Let's go see what else I can fix by working with the customer on this same kind of project. We're probably going to fix VPN and remote access. We don't have MFA on it. We can do that in the same project. We're going to add some VLANs to the network. And is there anything else in here we can resolve with the same network? No, I don't think so. So we're going to solve for those 4 things. So I'm going to create a recommendation based on those 4 things. This should be a familiar screen. Your assessment items that we're going to fix are down here at the bottom. Last time we created this from the asset list. This time the asset list is blank. So we'll get to that in just a minute. But we're going to do a network upgrade here. Okay. Pretty likely that this is going to get done, so we're going to bump it up there. And maybe we've already had the plan with the customer and they've already agreed to do this work, but they've told us this is going to wait till 2023. We're not going to do this work till 2023. So January 1st, 2023, first week of 2023, we're going to do this work. Yeah, I know it's a year out, but that's the soonest the customer can get to it financially. We're going to go ahead and plan it. So now I'll go back to my asset list and I'm going to pull in the network items that are beyond end of life. And maybe I'm even going to grab this one here that's going to go end of life by 2023. So let's just grab a whole bunch of these here and loop them into the recommendation. Now, if you notice, my recommendation is adding up the replacement costs of all these assets as I go. And it knows I'm going to replace 9 assets. It's going to need $6,700 to do this project. Now, my customer, we sit down and we talk about it. This is going to give my customer a more reliable network. And as we're talking about reliability, the customer says, you know, there's that back corner of the warehouse where we just don't have good Wi-Fi signal. Can you put an extra access point in to cover for that? Well, it's not a direct replacement of a current piece of hardware. So we probably need to budget for that extra. We're going to budget $400 to install it and $350 for an inexpensive wireless access point for the back corner of the warehouse. Now we've got a recommendation kind of put together. We've got a date put on it. It's kind of a low priority for the customer. They're not dealing with it for a whole year. And it actually has everything to do with the warehouse location. So we're going to go ahead and save this recommendation. And I just want to point out, when I do save a recommendation, we also get save as template pop up. We do have the ability to create recommendation templates. You can pull them forward. So if you do a lot of Microsoft 365 migrations, you can save the description, you can save the name and some of the settings that come down through here, so that they're very easy to bring back in the future, especially if you have long verbose descriptions of some of these. You may want to save some of those. So I'm going to go ahead and close this. Now we've got a second recommendation scheduled out for our customer. This one's planned, this one's accepted. And if we look at the budget forecast, we'll be able to see that these are budgeted out for the next couple of years. So we have recommendations. We should have recommendations. There we go. Here's recommendations for this customer for the next couple of years. So we see that we've got a couple of recommendations planned for this guy. That doesn't look right. Thought I put that in 2023. Let's go look at that. I did not. I put it in 2022. Look at that. So 2023. And now let's go save that. And now let's go back to our, actually, we don't even have to go to our budget forecast. We can go to recommendations. We can look at our recommendations roadmap, and we can see we have projects scheduled for 2021 into 2023. They'll be reflected very similarly on the budget when we go look at that 5-year budget forecast. So here we have recommendations. Why are those not showing? My default doesn't have customer accepted. We've added some types here so that we now have new kinds of recommendation templates. So those are not in my save types yet, because those are brand new. But recommendations here, you're going to go ahead and see we've got recommendations scheduled into the next couple of years, and that all moves through the budget nice and seamlessly. So that really is how we work from a risk assessment into a recommendation, how we can work from the asset list into a recommendation, and how we can tie all of that together to make a really good case for our customer on why they need to make these replacements for us. It also gives us a really easy way to build out a long-term budget that shows the customer how we can solve for all of the things that they flunked on the assessment, that we're not in compliance or not properly aligned with our best practices. So it really makes for an easy way to have this bigger conversation with our customers. So with that in mind, I want to talk about how we present this. We've shown you a half a dozen reports or a dozen reports in the platform. I think the platform totally can build about 35 or 40 reports. It's a big number. But we've added in this report builder, and what report builder does is gives you the ability to select certain reports, put them in the same order, a reusable order, where you can print them out over and over and over for different customers and still get the same result. And the beauty of this is that it allows the VCIO or the account management process to scale. Today, a lot of MSPs complain that the owner's the only one who knows enough to do it, that they bring in a new account manager, it takes them too long to get up to speed. The guy who was doing this left and nobody else knows what he was doing because it was all in weird spreadsheets and nobody has that skill set to unwind it. So what we do here is we build this template. We can use the template over in multiple customers, and the content just keeps on updating as we switch customers. But really what we're going to do is we're going to build a template. It's got a cover page. This is a Word doc that we're going to present as the cover page. A meeting agenda. This is WYSIWYG. You can bring in client logos. You can bring in screenshots from other tools, things like that. We have an executive summary that's built in the same editor. You can do a lot with this. You could bring in a bright gauge screenshot or a screenshot out of your backup tool to show what the backups are doing. You can do a lot in here. And then we're going to also lay out different views of the budget forecast, as well as a couple of those recommendations that we just built to show our customer what we're going to ask that they improve upon between now and the next meeting. So once I go ahead and select the 2 recommendations that I want to print, and keep in mind I could have 10 or 12 or 15 recommendations in here, I'm just going to show them the ones that are near term and more likely to happen. Then I'm going to get to where I can literally just click through this list and show this customer any and all of the reports that exist out here. So we can drill through this very, very quickly and generate these reports for my customer. But what I want you to see is I can come up here and download all of this as a single Word document. If I download it as a Word document, we're going to auto portrait and landscape. We'll turn all the pages where they need to be, so that a page like this will be landscape, but a page like this will be portrait. A cover page, a meeting agenda, something like that will live in portrait mode. But In today's world, a lot of you are still presenting remotely. A lot of you may be presenting from a projector in the customer's office, if you even are going to the customer's office. So presentation mode gives us a nice ability to kind of pop all of this data out and show it in, I call PowerPoint Lite, without having to actually go build a new PowerPoint, which is super time consuming, and we're trying to save time here, right? So here's that Word document that we're using as the customer's cover page presented in Report Builder. If I click forward, I can see the meeting agenda, I can see the assessment summary, and you see it's just going down the list here. So here's my assessment that I did for my customer. We're going to start with this to lead off the meeting. This represents the status quo. Mr. Customer, today we scored a 64 against our best practices. I'm concerned that you only scored a 61 in security, but you also only scored a 50 in business application software and hardware. So we got a couple categories here we got to focus on. We can either drill into every category, which is kind of time consuming, especially with longer assessments, or we can go to the end of the risk assessment where we have kind of a remediation plan all lumped at the end. This is going to show you all of the at-risk items and the needs attention items in just a couple of pages that becomes the work plan for you and your customer for the next 6 months or 12 months or however long it's going to take to solve for all of this. If you notice, we get the red answer. So it was asset inventory is what we flunked. It's not being performed today. And if we had made a comment there, we'd see the comment on why we should, what we need to do to fix it. So internet security appliance, current device is a router and doesn't have the right to monitoring and security features. We're going to recommend a network upgrade project, which happens to be right down here, so that we can get this critical infrastructure taken care of. Once we review the strategic business review, the assessment items with our customer, then we're going to go ahead and step into a budget. This time of year, I like to show a 7-month budget. It shows me the last month of 2020, of 2021, and then it'll show me 2022 for the first 6 months. So my customer can get a good idea what their spend is going to be next year. We've got one recommendation that they've already scheduled for December, and another recommendation we've already scheduled a couple of years in advance. So we don't even need to go over when we're going to budget these recommendations. But if I had recommendations still up here and recommendations not scheduled, this is my opportunity to talk to my customer about it, present them with the recommendation, and I can jump right back to the budget and say, okay, $10,600, Mr. Customer, when can we get that done based on your next 7 months? This looks like your kind of your cheap spot. Can we get it done in this time frame right here? Because life doesn't get any better than these couple of months right here. Using this, when are we going to address this method? Will definitely close you more business than, hey, Mr. Customer, can we spend money to get things done? Project roadmap, again, if you've got 8 or 10 or 12 projects on your roadmap and I'm missing customer accepted again, that's a new field that we added. And I've got to regenerate the report to get it to come back in here. If you had 10 projects for the customer, they would all show here in the roadmap, even though you're only talking through 1 or 2 in recommendations. Then as far as executive summary goes, this is, again, that WYSIWYG document. You can put your bright gauge reports, your backup stats, anything else that you want to show your customer here. And then I have my, what I consider to be kind of the below the fold reports. Unless the customer asks, I'm not going to have a big conversation about where we came from and how we got here, right? If they're buying in, if they're doing what I'm telling them to do, I don't have to go justify my existence. But if they want to hear it, happy to have that conversation and deliver that report. Here's the asset list. You can see this asset list includes all of the green items. If I wanted to only show the actionable items, I could just wipe away the green end of life and just talk about the ones that are either should be dead by now or are scheduled for replacement here really soon. User list, again, a very familiar report. You guys have already seen this. That breach secure now report. If we needed to talk through some bits and pieces of this, we could bring it up. This is a list of the contracts, everything that's pulling into the customer's budget to send them, to set the budget, to set the spend for the next 3 to 5 years. And then tickets. And tickets is a pretty slick report. It'll give us the ability to kind of drill in. We can see we did 142 tickets in the previous 3 months. Of those, 95 of them were software, and of those 95, 57 of those were related to one line of business application. So we probably have an issue with a line of business app that we need to spend some time and energy on. But this is probably more of a conversation for your primary point of contact and your VCIO or your account manager, not something that needs to waste the time of a bunch of people in a VCIO meeting. If your VCIO is actually meeting with the entire leadership team, this might be a little bit of a waste of time. So that's really Lifecycle Insights in a quick 30-minute demo. The report builder itself, pretty slick little product that enables you to take all the individual reports that are in Lifecycle Insights and get them out quickly. You can change the order, you can change the reports, you can deliver different reports, you can customize a big chunk of these reports really to be what you want to be your output from your MSP. Every MSP is going to do it a little bit differently. One of the things that we really believe is that if we give you a tool that provides you with some automation and the ability to build a framework or a standard, that you'll be able to keep some of what has made your MSP unique along the way. And that when you buy a new tool, you won't go into your customer talking like a completely different human being. The message will still be the same. The conversations will still be the same. We can just provide you that bit of automation and maybe step up your process game a little bit. So with that, again, I'm Alex from Lifecycle Insights. If you have any questions, comments, feel free to reach out to me, alex.farling, Farling, @lifecycleinsights.io. Thank you very much. Have a great day.